Hi, welcome back to my how-to channel. This is How To Chris. Thanks for joining me today. Today I'm going to show you how to get the overall length of your common roof rafter so you know what to purchase at the lumber yard. I'm also going to show you how to lay out the common roof rafter. So after you lay it out on a scrap board, you can take a measurement and then you'll know what exactly to purchase beforehand. So let's get right into this. I write down, there's 5 pieces of information that I need to know when I'm doing a common roof rafter. I need to know what pitch I'm choosing. It's 612 in this case. I'll write 612 down. I need to know the run of the building, so that's half the distance. If I have a gable roof like this, and my rafters come together actually at a ridge board, I'll need to know where that ridge board is. So I need to know half the span of the building. So my building is 4 feet, so the span is 4 feet, so it's only 2 feet. Half of that is 2 feet for the run. So I'll write down 2 foot, a 2 foot run. I need to know 1/3 of the rafter so I don't exceed that when I notch out the bird's mouth. So I'll measure the rafter. I've got 5 3/8, but I want to divide this by 3. A simple way to do that is I hook my tape. This would be perpendicular, but then I turn it on an angle till I hit 6, and then I'll mark 2 and 4. Then I'll have 1, 2, 3 segments. If I measure that first, up to that first tick mark, I've got 1 3/4 inches. So I'll write down 1 3/4 inches, and that is 1/3 the thickness of the rafter. I need to know what my overhang is. I want an 8-inch overhang, so I'll write 8-inch overhang. And I need to know the thickness of my ridge board. I'm using 2 by 10, so it's going to be 1.5 inches. If you're using an LVL, it may be 1 3/4 inches, and so you have to know the thickness of your ridge board. Again, my ridge board is a 2 by 10, so it's a 2 by, which is 1.5 inches. So I wrote down 5 things. I'll show you. I wrote down the slope, the run, 1/3 the thickness of the rafter, the overhang, and the thickness of the ridge board. If you're doing trusses, then you're not going to have a ridge board. You're going to have your rafters come together, and you're going to have a gusset with a plywood gusset nailed over here, over that, or even a metal bracket. And if you have a 312 or less, you're going to have a ridge beam underneath. So you might not always have a ridge board. Now I'm going to show you how to do this with this carpenter square, and I'm going to show you how to do it with speed squares, an adjustable speed square, and also you can use a bevel gauge. So in an upcoming video, I'll show how to do this on paper. It's a little bit more complex, so I just want to show it the basic, very simple way to do it so that you can get your roof started and completed very simply. There's minimal steps and less room for error to do it this way. I do it this way quite a bit, and there's 2 simple ways I'm going to show today, again with these squares, and then some other quick tips on how to do it. So I'm going to start off real basic first, and let's get started. Okay, so all we do is we look at our 5 pieces of information. 612. Take my square. The tongue of the square is where you're going to choose your rise, and I want 6. So 6 on the tongue. That's the 1.5 inch part. And on the body, we'll choose 12. So I'm using the outside edge of the square. 6 and 12. Place it on the rafter. This is going to be up at towards the ridge of the rafter. We're going to start at the top and work our way down. We got 6 and 12. Just hold that like that. Put that on. One other thing you can do, if you don't want to keep holding it and moving it down, you can take a scrap piece of wood, put it underneath, put 2 spring clamps on it. And I'll show you how to do that so you can do that. It's, if you're doing a really long length, I would recommend this. So you just put that on, get your other spring clamp, and make sure you're on nice, and hook it on, and then you can just slide down like this. Okay, so again, 6/12. What we're going to do is we're going to mark out along the tongue here. This is going to be the ridge mark, or the plumb mark. Okay, and then we have to mark where the 12 is. And that's down here. Oops. Make sure we stay on the track. The 12 is right down here. I'm going to put a mark. And we're going to look at our information. 2 foot run means we have to move the square twice. So this, we marked it here. I'm going to call this 1. I'll put a number 1 here. And I'm going to move it down until I hit that mark. Line it up. Put a nice mark. Put a number 2 in between the frame of the square. Let me come and show you that. Put a number 2. Make sure you're lined up. Number 2, and put another mark where the 12 is. Okay, so you have the 1, 2 marks, because that's 2 foot a run, but you're going to come again, and you have to make another, you just have to put another plumb mark. So you're going to put that plumb mark. So far, we've got the ridge marked, 1 mark with a plumb mark, another one, 2 with another plumb mark. So this represents the building line. Now I'm going to have a bird's mouth that always goes toward the direction of the ridge board. So over here is going to be a bird's mouth. Now at this time, what I can do is I could take this cleat off of the square. Won't really need that now. And I can determine that bird's mouth. So it can't be greater than, we look back here, 1/3, it can't be greater than 1 3/4 inches. We can't remove more than 1 3/4 inches. So we have that information. So we can take our square and just mark out and line it up and put 1 3/4 inches. We know that we can't remove more than that. Okay, so I'm going to take my square, I'm going to flip it around, so that's a 90-degree angle. I'll come in here and show you. And I'm going to place it right on that plumb mark. This is where the building line is. And I'm going to determine how much of a seat cut do I want. This is the heel and this will be the seat. The seat is what sits on top of the building, the wall plates. Well, I'm going to want, I like 3 inches. I want it to sit 3 inches. Okay. So if we sit 3 inches, that's going to be comfortable because it's going to allow, it's going to be good because it's going to be within that 1 3/4 inches. So in this case I want 3 inches. I'm going to mark that. If you wanted it to sit on there 3.5 inches, then you would just come up until it says 3.5, bring it to where it hits 3.5, and you put your mark. Now 3.5 is fine. I'll show you what that would look like. 3.5 would be like that, and we're actually still within that 1 3/4 inches. So whichever I decide, I'll go with the 3.5, because most people are going to go with the 3.5 because you want it to sit on top of your wall plate. So let's do the 3.5, and I'm actually allowed. I'm still not greater than that 1 3/4 inches. So we got 3.5 seat. So this is the seat, and over here is the heel. Okay, now we have to do the soffit. So soffit could be a little tricky, but not really. So you're going to take your framing square and you're going to line it up on that plumb mark, which is also the building line. And we look over and I see that I've got an 8-inch overhang. So I line up my square on that plumb mark. I find 8 inches. I make a mark. Now if I mark it here and then later I go to put a sub fascia on and a finished fascia board on, I'm not going to be 8 inches. I'm going to be greater than that. So I like to make my deductions now. So at that 8-inch mark, I'm going to have a 2x for a sub fascia. So I'm going to deduct 1.5 inches. So here we go. I went back 1.5 inches, and then I'm going to deduct a 3/4 inches because I want a regular fascia board on there, a 1x. So to deduct 3/4, we go another 3/4. Now if you want to if you have scrap material around, you can just simply like stick it on here, mark it, and then I know it's 3/4 I want for the fascia. I can just mark it again. But you can also just read your square. So you go back from 8, 1.5 inches for the sub fascia, and 3/4 for the finished fascia board. Then you have to get this to be plumb with that mark. So you just hold your square, 6 and 12. 6 and 12. Just like this. And make a mark. So after I cut this and I put my sub fascia and fascia, it's going to give me a total of 8 inches. You can see that. And that'll be perfect. There is one more thing we have to do. And that is when you put your fascia board on, you have to determine what you want to cut this here. So let me let's use a board. Let's call this our fascia board. So you just take your scrap fascia board if you have it, and when you stick it on, you don't go all the way to the top because the fascia board will be too high. It'll be proud, and then when the plywood would hit. So you just hold it down so that the top of the rafter, the plywood doesn't hit the fascia board. So you don't want to be you don't want to be beveling the fascia board if you don't have to. So you just drop it. Now here it's the full length, which isn't bad, but I really want to have some material underneath the soffit so that I can attach, you know, whatever my soffit, some other materials under there flat. So I can determine what I want to do here. So I want to have like a 3/4 reveal down here. So I can put a block here, I can mark 3/4. And then my finished material is going to be 3/4. So actually, if I turn this block sideways, that'll give me 1.5 inches. And then I just have to make a mark. And I'll just make a mark and I'll explain that. So, if I cut this off, and now I'm sticking on my fascia board, you'll see that I'll have my overhang. I'll have a nice reveal. Plus I have enough to attach some material underneath. So that's going to look just like this. This will be a piece under here that I'll attach later. And then I'll have a nice overhang again. So you have to consider that. You don't want to have it, especially if your fascia board is smaller, you can't have the rafter thicker than your finished fascia board. So you make that one more deduction here. And so this will be cut out too. So let me show you exactly what that looks like. Okay, so we've got, there's one more step though, but I'm getting there. We've got our ridge board here. We came down one time and one more time. See, 1 and 2. Plumb, these are both plumb marks. We've got our bird's mouth. Decided to go with 3.5 inches for the seat. That still allowed me not to remove more than 1/3 of the board, which was good. Then I have the 8-inch overhang. It goes all the way to here, 8-inch, but I made my deductions. Then I put a plumb mark. And then I also figure where my fascia board goes and allow that to overhang and have a reveal plus an area to put some blocking so that I can have my soffit nice with some whatever material I decide to use. So you need to consider those things. Now, if you have if you're doing, like I'm doing here, I'm using a ridge board, we need that last piece of information. Our ridge board is 1.5 inches. So all we do now is we deduct half of the ridge from here. I have to just go back 3/4. I could just take a scrap piece of wood and just mark out 3/4. I could do that. I could just square it down, square it across like that. I could also just put my square on it like this and just come over 3/4 and put a mark. So a number of ways of doing that, but that's the last step you have to do. Now I'm just going to show you, before I wrap up this video, how to use this speed square. So it's got a pivot mark on it, and what you do is you put that on the top of the board, you pivot it till you hit the number, your slope that you want. So I want 6, so I'll find the 6 and I'll show you how to do that. So I'm going to put that on there, pivot it until the 6, which is here, hits the top of the board, and then I'll mark it. So it says it here, common. So that's, you just read your speed square. Now this is a nice square. It's got the bevel, the adjustable gauge on it, and you have to just you'll read it. It'll say mark plumb cuts along this edge. So what I'll do is I'll set this to number 6, where it says common and jack rafters. Stick it on there, slide it down, mark it. So that's how you use that one. I like to get my bevel gauge set up a lot of times to the angle and I could just slide this down, and it's pretty helpful to get some of these other marks as well. Okay, so I just wanted to explain that. So that's, and then now really the purpose of this is, so now I know what size material to purchase at the lumber yard. So I'll hold my tape at the edge, up at where the ridge is, which is over here. I'll stretch out the tape to find out where the part of the last part of this soffit is. So actually I'm around 3 feet here. I'm a little bit bigger than 3 feet. So in this case, I'm going to show you a trick. So we're real close to 3 feet. I don't want to buy a 4-foot board when I can buy, let's say, you know, I can use just a 3-foot board. I don't want to have that much waste. So what I can do is, instead of deducting back, like I just showed you how to do that, you could hold your ruler 3/4 past and then stretch out and get your measurements. So for example, if we held it at 3/4 past, I'm going to show you what this means, how to do that actually. So this is where it might become a little bit more complicated, but not a big deal. So if you look at your square and you go to where it says 6, let's find that here. It says 13.42. That's 13 3/8. So that's, we're looking at the 6, where it says 6. Okay, that's our rise. So between each of these marks is 13 3/8. So how I know that is because if I took a straight edge again and held it at 6 and 12 and measured across, it's 13 3/8. So you just indicated it on the square to make things easy, but you could still find that number yourself. So 13.42 means 13 3/8, and that's just because 0.42 times 8 equals 3.36, which means 3/8. So 13 3/8. So if I know I have 2 feet to run, so that's, I have to do, if I want to do another method, I can do 13.42 times the 2 foot to run is 26.84. So you would write down 26.84. You need to get, okay, so now I'm going to show you that next technique for getting the length of your common roof rafter, just using the tape, and instead of stepping down your carpenter square, you can use the tape, because we know that, again, some information, when we do it with this technique, we're going to write down the same bit of information as we did before, plus a little additional information. So we had 5 steps the other way with the step down method. We wrote down 6/12. We put the overhang. We did the run first, which is a 2 foot run. So same thing, 2 foot run. 1/3 the board was 1 7/8. Nope, 1 3/4. So 1/3 this board was 1 3/4. Write that down again. Our overhang is 8 inches. Our ridge board is 1 1/2 inches. But now we're going to write down a couple other things. So let me show you why. So far it's the same thing. Five steps here. 1 2 3 4 5. Now we can look at our square at the 6 again and find that on the body of the square, if we can find it. Okay, here it is. Body of the square at 6, it says 13.42. If you follow that all the way back, it'll say common roof rafters. So again, I showed how to do that. 6 and 12 measure across 13.42. So I'm going to write down 13.42, and I'm also going to just write next to it 3/8 because it's actually 13 and 3/8 if it's a fraction. And really, that's the only additional bit of information we need. So it's pretty, so far, it's just really one step. So I'm going to take the tape. You can usually hold it right on the edge of your board, but since we're real close, and I don't want to have that 3/4 waste, I'm going to make my deduction ahead of time. So I'll just slide the tape out a little to 3/4. Then I'll run down to the number that we need, which is 13.42 twice, because that represents 1 foot of run. So 13.42 times 2 is 26.84. 26.84. The 0.84 times 8 is 7/8. So I'll write 7/8 next to that. So it's really 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It's 5 pieces of information plus 2 additional pieces of information. Now let me show you how to get the how I came up with 26.84. So we did 13.42 times 2 feet of run, 26.84. And I did 0.84 times 8, 6.72, which means 7. So that's 7/8. Then I'll stretch the tape out, hold it 3/4 past, mark all the way down 26.84, 26 and 7/8 actually. And make that mark right there, all the way down at the end of the board. Now, at this point you have to make a plumb mark. So we're going to do 6 and 12. Line it up to that mark. Here we go. Line it up. 6, 12. And put a mark. That represents the building line. Then from here, we're going to do the same process and do our overhang. Coming up at that ridge, don't forget to put in. Don't forget to put that that ridge mark. So 6 at 12. And let me show you what this means again. So I had that tape held 3/4 past, ran it all the way down, and that gave me the building line. And then I'm going to do the soffit. So let me show you that bit of information. It's same as before, 6/12, 2 foot of run. I don't know if that's coming through in the frame. 2 foot of run, 1 3/4 is 1/3. Make sure we got that 1/3. 1/3 of the rafter is 1 3/4. 8-inch overhang, 1.5 ridge board. 13.42 is what each foot of run is equal to, and I have to multiply that by 2, which is 26.84. 0.84 came to 7/8. 0.84 times 8. Yep. So those are the 2 techniques, with the step down, with the carpenter square, and using a tape, which is great on really long lengths. So those are the ways of doing it, and that's, you can see that how this would become useful, because at that mark I made here, I could just take my bevel gauge and make sure it's set at 6/12. So you would just set it, block it, you would slide it down to where that tick mark is, and then you can use the bevel gauge. It's pretty handy. You don't need it, but so let's lay out the soffit. Might as well just go over that one more time. So it's 8-inch. We're going to come over here, line up on that building line, put a mark at 8 inches, and we're going to come back whatever we need to deduct. So 1.5 inches, I'll come back 1.5 inches. That's a subfascia. And then I'm going to go another 3/4 back, which is here. And then we're going to hold the square again at 6 and 12. 6 and 12. And you can mark it. Or you can see how that you could just use that bevel gauges. We'll put that to use. Okay. And then we have to make the cut at the bottom to allow for our soffit material to fit. And you do the same thing as before. So we took the fascia board, we stuck it on there, made sure we kept it low enough. Let's do that again. Stick that on there. Make sure it's low enough. Make sure this is the top of the roof. This can't be protruding out. It has to be just like when you put a piece of plywood on. When you put your soffit on later, you butt the fascia board right to that, onto those scrap cleats. So you just stick this on there. And I said I want to stay back like 3/4. So I'll hold a 1x, and that gave me 3/4 for the finished material, and then I wanted a 3/4 reveal. So I'll cut this out as well. So this is really how it comes out. So those are the two techniques. And I hope that really helps out. So you can check out some of my other videos. I show how to get like the height of the posts for underneath your ridge board. How to I'm going to put up another video on how to do your hip rafter layout and cutting them. So I'll just do a quick preview of that. This is a hip rafter. The cheek cuts at the tail, and the cheek cuts up at the ridge. This is a compound miter. I do all my marks along the top of the hip rafter. This winds up at a 6/12. For a 6/12 common roof rafter, when you do the hip rafter, it's going to be at 18 inches. Because you check your square again. If you do 6, and then you're going to hold at the body, you're going to hold it at 17. And when you measure across, it'll be 18.00, and that'll say that indicated on the square as well. So how you come up with the 17? We use 12 for the commons, but for hips we use 18. That's because you do 2 squared times 12 is 16.97, and we just call it 17 because hip rafters are at a 45-degree angle to the common rafters. So I'll just give you again a quick preview before we finish up this video. So you're going to have your common roof rafters coming in here with I got a ridge here, a ridge board. Then I've got a true hip has equal common rafters. So this king rafter is going to be the same length exactly as the other common roof rafter, and that's going to go perpendicular to the gable roof, just like this. So let me turn it a bit so you can see it better. So So this is going to sit just like this perpendicular. And then your hip rafter will come in at an angle like this. Hip rafter is less steep. A common rafter is steeper and shorter, and a hip rafter is longer and less steep. So you'll see a lot of guys who are working on the roof, on a hip roof, they'll walk up the hip rafter because it's not as steep. It's easier to walk up. So those are the two different distinctions between the hip and the common roof rafter. Common roof rafter is pretty easy to lay out, as you can see. And jack rafters are easy as well. Hip rafters are more complex, but I'm going to put up another video how to do that. It's just a little bit more involved. And instead of deducting up at the ridge like 3/4 of an inch, in this case, if it's the same scenario with an 1.5 inch ridge, I'll actually deduct off from the tip of this board. After it's marked, I'll come back 1 1/16 inches, because these all have to line up, these points, at one point in the where that ridge and the gable, rafters, hip rafter, everything intersects at one point. So that's 1 1/16 inches. I'm going to show how to get all that information. It's more complicated. You're going to need to know the height above the plate, and you're going to have to drop you're going to actually have to drop your hip rafter as well. So I'm going to explain all that stuff, and you get your height above the plate just by looking at your common roof rafter. You just measure up that plumb line from here to here. It's got to be parallel, and you measure up. And so once you get that, then you'll have some more information, because you have to drop your hip rafter. I'm going to explain more on that on the next on an upcoming video, most likely. So I hope that helped you out, and I would review my video here, and you should be able to get through your roof project with no trouble. This is just another diagram I made explaining. I'll zoom in on this to show you what this looks like. So that's coming in. You can see the different terminology of the roof. You've got the bird's mouth, the seat and the heel cut, the ridge. You got your slope here. You've got this explains how to find the height of your post as well. So I explain that right in here. So I'll go over that real quickly. So like if you have 6-inch rise and my building is 10 feet, a 10-foot run, that's 60 inches. But then I have to add the height above the plate, and then minus the ridge board, minus the ridge drop, and that gives me the post height. So it's a little, just a bit more information. I might, like I said, I might go into this, how to get that, if you don't already know it. I think this one video with the common roof rafter should help you out, hopefully. And again, you only need your framing square and the tape really to do this whole project. It's nice to have some speed squares, bevel gauge, and like another square. All helpful. But yeah, it could be a little overwhelming at first, but if you just follow some basic steps, make sure you just take your take down the key bits of information, so you don't have to keep guessing along as you're doing it. You'll write down 6/12, 2-foot run, 1/3 the thickness of the board is 1 3/4, your overhang, your ridge board. Now, that's what the square, the step down method. If you're using the tape, then you'll just do 6/12, 2-foot run, the 1/3, the overhang, the ridge board, all the same, but you'll write down the 13.42, which is how much each run is equivalent to, and then you would multiply that by how many times how much run you have in the building. So I had 2 feet of run, so I multiplied it. You're just going to need to know how to convert your fractions into your decimals into fractions. So if I want like 0.42 into eighths, I would multiply it by 8. So that's 3/8. But if I want it in 16ths, I'll do 0.42 times 16. And then you'll see that you'll have to change the 6, and just 7's greater than 6, so you make it 7/16. So you can do that all the way to, like, you can do 32nds, 64ths, but with framing, you're fine with 16ths and 8ths is also fine. So, yeah, keep in mind, framing is, it's acceptable for 16ths and 8ths. So, yeah, I hope that helped, and check out my YouTube homepage, and if you want to help support my channel, that'll be great. If you want to like or subscribe, that'll be awesome too. So look forward to your comments and putting out some more building and other how-to content. Take care. Good luck with your project.